This is Mr. Brian Break for Breaking Down Security for the week. We're recording on May 13th, so welcome back, everybody. Miss Berlin and Mr. Betcher is with me as usual.
Hello.
Yes, I am.
And happy Mother's Day to Ms. Berlin. She
Thank you.
Is one of those, as well as to my lovely wife and Mrs. Betcher. So,
yeah.
I appreciate your wife, Mrs. Betcher, for letting you record tonight, sir.
Excellent. I'll let her know.
Yeah,
I'll let her know you appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't want her to hate me, so it's because I'm a bit of a taskmaster. So I was like, we must record tonight, and so.
And I'm gone starting Wednesday, so I don't know when we get to do next.
Oh, right. So, wow, you're just bouncing back and forth between cons. So you just came back from...
May and June are going to just crazy.
Really? Are you going to Hacker Summer Camp?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. You just came back from something in Detroit, right?
I did. I did Converge Detroit, and they have a B-Sides Detroit after that I couldn't stay for. But, yeah, it's a really good conference. They had like 300 people or so.
Wow.
2 tracks, and it was really good. They have a lot of good people running that. So
very nice.
Did a little bit of the CTF. I keynoted Thursday morning and had a lot of really good feedback on that one. I did my mental health talk, and I had added about 5 or 6 extra slides to that and changed around some stuff. So
very nice. When you go and make talks, when you update them, is it because you found something new, or is it because somebody gave you feedback like, oh, I do this, or there's a program out there for X? I mean, what did you decide you want, or did you just, update the dank memes?
Well, all 3.
Oh, all right.
I like, if I ever plan on doing a talk more than once or twice, I like to just organically grow it. So anybody that comes up to me afterwards and talks to me about it, if they have any input or feedback or anything like that, I try and put that in the version that I give next, especially if it's really good advice. Like this last time, I kind of rushed through a couple things because I cover a handful of the different types of mental illness and their symptoms. And I think I need to switch those around a little bit because the way I put together I had like bipolar and multiple personality disorder right next to each other. And I kind of blurred the lines between those. And I actually, there's a very large amount of people in the audience with psychology backgrounds. And like some girl, I think, came up to me and she said she had a master's in psychology.
Yeah.
And like those people watching me talk about mental health is just like,
oh, wow.
Freaks me out, right? Because I'm definitely not a subject matter expert on mental health.
Right.
I'm just like trying to cover it at a base level. But it's cool too because they give you a lot of insight that the normal people in our industry wouldn't have.
Very nice. Okay. All right. Before we get to our guest this week, Mr. Betcher, do you have any malware, any updates, or anything you'd like to mention? How are you this week?
No updates to malware, but I've been doing a lot of research. Michael and I have both been looking at a lot of PowerShell exploits as well as WMI. So we've been researching that a lot. And there's always been a lot of potential there for sneaky stuff in the WMI space.
Right.
And so I'm looking heavily at that.
Awesome. And some of that stuff may end up in a LogMD release in the near future?
Yeah, we're incorporating some WMI type detections or artifact hunting, right?
Okay.
So, and then of course all the PowerShell stuff. We're adding stuff to Pro to be able to detect things with PowerShell that are out of the ordinary.
Oh,
so
nice.
Run a quick query across your enterprise just to see with LogMD getting some cool PowerShell stuff.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you
by the way.
Oh, yeah?
Real quick, sorry to interrupt, but man, I can't remember the last malware I've gotten where they didn't use PowerShell. So they're using it heavily.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, it's enabled by default on many, Windows systems, and they don't...
And 90% of the people that do application whitelisting whitelist PowerShell.
Yeah. because it's often necessary for the OS, or it's they don't know why they need it. It's just there. So
and you can't get rid of it.
Right.
It's part of the OS now. So
yep. Anyway, so appreciate the update.
I'm expecting soon you'll start seeing some malware with JavaScript or something, because I just saw that Microsoft added JavaScript support to Excel.
I saw that. Yeah. It's just going to be a hot mess with Office. I think JavaScript macros and stuff are going to be the new hotness, I think. So that was my prognostication hat being put on right there. But before we get too deep into whatever it is we want to talk about, for those of you who listen to podcasts, there are a number of good podcasts out there. I listen to the Southern Fried Security podcast, Risky Business. Manager Tools has been one of my new hotnesses. Thank you, Mr. Betcher, for turning me on to that one. And one of the other ones that I've been really excited hearing about, and Ms. Berlin, I know, is excited to have this gentleman on. Jack Rhysider?
Yeah, you did it.
No, Rhysider. I screwed it up again.
No, it's
Rhysider.
Oh, good.
Hello.
Yeah, no bingo card for you people, you listeners at home. So Jack, thank you for coming on the show with us. For those of you who don't know, Jack does the DarkNet Diaries, which is, I'm going to let him tell a little bit about himself and what DarkSide Diaries is about. And we have some topics of discussion that he's suggested that we're going to talk about. So, Jack, please take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, what you do, and what the show's about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Big fan of this show, too. So I've been a network engineer for like the last 10 years, but in the last 5 or 6 years, I started getting into security, getting deep into defensive, mostly, blue teams, that kind of stuff. Was starting to build a SOC for a while, and just doing as much monitoring and defensive as I could. And, as I was doing that, I was going to a lot of conferences. I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and I like podcasts like this a lot because it catches you up on the latest chatter for the security news. But this is kind of the latest chatter, right? And I didn't hear a lot of podcasts just taking a step backwards and saying, hey, that news that came out like 3 years ago, was there any updates to that? Like, I think the first one that really kind of got my interest was the bash
Shell shock.
Yeah, no, there was another one. It was similar to that. It was a Linux command line. It was a Linux vulnerability.
Heartbleed.
Oh my gosh. Anyways, what turns out is ever since then they had like a fork, and they had big organizations like Google and stuff had a lot of tools that had used this, and they were vulnerable, and nobody was giving to these company, to this open source project. And so a lot of stuff happened years after this happened, and like nobody's talking about these minor updates ever since. So I just wanted to kind of do a show that goes back and revisit some of these breaches or hacks or vulnerabilities, and kind of paint the whole picture. Because now, maybe if there's a breach, now we know who it was. They were put in prison or never got caught, or whatever the case is. We can finally tie a bow to the whole story. And often, news is kind of like that first draft of history.
Right.
So unless you're like already caught up, you miss a lot of follow-ups of what happened. So my show kind of takes you back and does it in a storytelling format of getting you in. How did this person get to do the breach and get through, all the defenses that a company does, and then what happened after. A lot of the aftermath is really interesting.
Cool. So
that's what DarkNet Diaries is.
Cool. So you do something like, where Stuxnet ended up 3 years later, or, the full story of how the first computer worm occurred, or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's just, infosec has just endless stories. So stuff that's just fascinating and interesting to me, I'm going to dive into it for like a few weeks and get every bit of information as I can, and then create a show on just that one breach.
Nice. Okay. And so you are committing yourself to your craft. You have recently become you've decided to make yourself less available to the job that you were doing, meaning you quit, and so you're working on.
I think it's called fun employed.
Fun employed, yes. Oh, I was trying to remember that.
I like that.
Fun employed, yeah. So you're working on building out the show, which is great, and so what kind of things are you looking forward to in the upcoming months?
Yeah, I mean, I've always got this kind of like entrepreneurship itch in the back of my head, and I'm just like, I just need the time to go do it. And so I've got a book that I'm writing. It's how to get into infosec is what it's all about,
right?
And then how to advance your career, like you want to go from junior to senior, like what kind of steps it's kind of teach you to go through that and that kind of stuff. So I've got that's going to come out in the next few months. I've got a few other websites, non-infosec related stuff that I'm working on. Just things that I'm going to try to go for it, do it myself, and see if I can how far I can do.
Very nice.
And just take a few months off to build on my own projects. And honestly, I've never been as busy in my life.
Nice.
So it's a lot of work.
Well, when you're driven, you see where you need to go, and a job is where you're being dragged into awful directions. So it's good to have a plan. So so we had some topics of discussion. So the first one you put on here was, do hospitals have a free pass when they're being attacked? And you put #OptJustina.
Yeah. So I kind of, there's a bunch of talking points that are brought up during my show that I really don't do much pundit stuff. I do a lot of just reporting. So I just wanted to kind of talk about some of the interesting things that just get brought up.
Right.
And I think it was 2013, a hospital came under a lot of scrutiny because they had taken custody of a child, and the parents were freaking out, and they're like, you have no right to just take my child. And they went to the news, and it hit big, the news cycles, and Anonymous saw this and said, hey, we're going to stand up for this child. And they attacked the hospital. They did a full DDoS against it.
Right.
And we've heard this story before of hospitals getting hit with ransomware, and we all just kind of shake our heads. But I think the question I have is, should hospitals have a free pass? And once it's a hospital, go around it? Or is there ever a time where hospitals have done something so wrong that it does justify an attack? Or, I'm on the defender team, so I never want my clients to be attacked.
Right.
And that's always hard too, is morally standing up for someone who may have done something pretty bad.
Yeah. Amanda, you used to work in a hospital, right?
Yeah. And that's actually the first podcast of his that I listened to.
Right.
And it blew my mind, because as a mom, and if like my kid would have been in the situation because like the hospital actually took not custody, I guess, but like temporary custody of this child because they thought the parents weren't providing the right health care, even though like this girl was getting sicker and sicker and sicker just because the doctor that she did have and the program that she was on, like the doctor had moved to a different hospital that was further away. And they're like, oh, why don't we just take her off all of her meds and we'll see if this stuff works. And then she just started getting sicker. And then I think if I remember, she wasn't, she eventually like lost the ability to walk. Yeah.
The hospital didn't. So here's the thing: is we never heard the hospital side. And
right.
It was like DCF in Boston, which is like the
Child and Family Services.
And Family Services or whatever.
Yeah. So the state actually took custody. It was the hospital that took her, and then the state took custody. And that had to go before a judge, and the nurses and doctors were under some sort of Hippocratic oath to do the best thing they can for their patients, and judges had to decide this and stuff. And we never heard any of those sides of why the judges ruled and the way they did, and why the hospital took the custody as well. So we only hear the side of the parents, and anytime you see a distraught parent like my child was taken away from me, you just side with them immediately.
Right.
And so it's so easy to say the hospital was in the wrong, but what if we're the ones defending that hospital? What if we worked there? Would we have a moral problem with that? Or have you guys ever been in a situation where you had a client and you're just like, I don't I don't want to defend this client. I don't like these people.
Well, I think so. The anonymous DDoSing the hospital didn't do anything to help the hospital itself and may have put other people in jeopardy.
So one of the things that obviously their website went down. It was in the middle of a donation pledge drive, so they lost a lot of donations. They couldn't get the donations through the website. Mm-hmm. They also took the whole phone system down because they were ringing every phone in the hospital.
Right.
And as well as they got into the email servers. They sent some phishing, and so the email servers were compromised. So they just took the whole email servers down, which I think they had something like 5,000 email addresses, email users. So you can imagine the Boston Children's Hospital going down for a week with no email. How do you communicate that to the people? So it was pretty impactful. And I think the whole point of Anonymous was to just call attention to this, to say, hey, world, look at the Boston Children's Hospital is really screwing up. Let's focus on that so that, put pressure on them. And at the same time, there was protests going outside the hospital, just on the streets,
right,
demanding this girl get, let back to her parents.
Right.
So it was a pretty heated point, and it was making headline news and all this stuff that, this was happening. So
what did it make news before or after the hospital was DDoSed? Because if it was
and that's how Anonymous got news of this, is like, wow, this is hitting the big time news.
Right.
We got to get on this too. And it turns out, so the story, if you want to listen to the episode, it turns out they caught the person. And it turned out to be a single person that was doing this. So, you also say like this was in the name of Anonymous, but it was also just one person doing. I think there were probably some other people helping, but it all came down on the shoulders of one person.
Right. Right. So, we hear about this all the time. There's hospitals all the time being hit by ransomware. You don't hear a lot of hacktivists doing things against hospitals or healthcare systems because, for the longest time, hospitals, it's like, who's going to, do something for, somewhat universally good organization. They're there to help people. They're help to heal. The reasons for attacking a hospital are, usually they just want the information. They want the PHI. They want the PII to be able to do blackmail ops or to find and make profiles on people. There's a ton of reasons why. Sometimes they just get lumped into an IP range and they get served up some ransomware. But
and they're usually really easy targets because healthcare is one of the more common unsecure verticals. Right, yeah. It's like healthcare, finance, education.
It's ironic. It's ironic because the people who work there are terribly technical in one very small specific field, and they're not technical anywhere else. It seems like I used to do not a long time and not a lot, but I did like 5 engagements for a healthcare consultancy, and every place I went to, it was always the same. We can't make things difficult or too difficult because one, the customer, which is the patients, can't use it, or two, if the doctors can't use it, then they're just going to bring in their own devices and be insecure anyway, or they're going to leave and we won't have anybody to actually look at patients, and so the care will go down. So it's a hot mess with regards to hospitals, and this will lead on into our second point here that we've got as well. But it's just amazing the amount of technology in a place that it's almost like a university type environment where it might as well be wide open.
Yeah, and in healthcare, like every technology decision is based on, well, the doctors like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Because good doctors are, when they find them, they want to keep them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't like the EMR they're using, or the security controls are too tight and they can't actually do the job they are being paid to do, they obviously went into being a doctor to help people. Like I'm sure maybe if you went into it for the money, but
Right.
I mean, for the majority of them, they're there so they can help as many people as possible. And when they can't do that, they get very angry.
Right.
And a very large amount of doctors are type A personality, which is like always super fun to work with.
Yeah.
On the support side, we always had a lot of luck getting like physician champions that understand technology and can, tell the other ones that don't, like, calm down, this is why we're doing this, and kind of bridge that gap.
Right. So my question is, Anonymous, whether or not it was Anonymous as the organization, or some lone gunman, to coin a phrase, who was working as part of Anonymous, because anybody can say, yeah, we are Legion, we are Anonymous, and, he's doing stuff in the name of them. It didn't help Anonymous in any way, because all it did was show that Anonymous is attacking a hospital. So they're not the good guys in this, even though what they were trying to do may have been a good thing. It ended up backfiring, I think, horribly from a media perspective. It's along the same lines of, you hear about hackers who are, patching unsecure routers. They're doing it because they're trying to reduce the number of vulnerabilities in the environment, but by doing so, they're actually breaking the law. And, so in doing good, no good deed goes unpunished in this case, and they, end up suffering ill effect from it.
Yeah, and that's really interesting you point that out, because in the research I did for this episode, I found a tweet from Your Anon News, which has like 1 million Twitter followers, a more famous anonymous account. Mm-hmm. And they said, this is quoting the tweet, to all the Anons attacking the Children's Hospital in the name of Anonymous via Op Justina, it's a hospital, stop it. Oh. And so Anonymous was actually calling out this anonymous person.
Right.
And that has 200 responses saying, why should a hospital be, immune to attacks if they're doing something terrible? Then they should be held just as accountable. Also, they're like, right. They charge too much money, and the people aren't always caring. And so there was a lot of two-sided debate. It was really a healthy argument on whether this is, justifiable or not.
Right.
There are two sides always.
Oh, yeah.
More. So I hesitate to, make a judgment on something when I haven't heard the other side, right? And it seems like that was the case. Do we still not know why the hospital tried to take custody of the child, or is that still under wraps?
It's under wraps. The official is we never heard anything from the hospital or DCS, but the belief is that the doctors thought that the parents were giving too much treatment to their child, or not the right treatment, and they were just doing the wrong thing and making their daughter sick.
Yeah.
To an extreme amount that would cause them to take their kid away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't pass judgment on what was the doctors and stuff were doing. I mean, obviously there were steps that went through before the rights of the parents were taken away. So, I mean, they hopefully all of that got resolved in a fairly healthy manner. I've just never been a fan of some of the stuff Anonymous does. I mean, obviously they have an ethos that they follow, and some people just take it to that nth degree, which is like, whoa, okay. Because obviously there were people, cooler heads in the larger Anonymous group that were like, yeah, probably shouldn't hit a hospital. We have standards, and you've just crossed that standard into evil town or whatever. We're just slightly evil over here, and you just went really evil. So I just find that interesting. So.
One last thing there is during this research, I found that the CIO of the hospital published a full article in the New England Journal of Medicine to try to teach other hospitals how to defend themselves against Anonymous. And I think the name of the article is something like When Anonymous Attacks Your Hospital. Wow. And not only is there a full article, but there's also like a whole webinar that he did as well. And that's on YouTube. And it only has like 100 hits. And this is one of those things that's like, well, you may have remembered Anonymous attacking the hospital, but you just don't remember all the things that happened afterwards. And for the CIO to give a full debrief of how the attack took place, when it happened, what they saw, what their impact was, They were getting doxxed and all this stuff. It's just an unprecedented view into the whole attack. And that's one of the reasons why I make this is to go and find all those little details and put it all into one big presentation.
Right. Very cool. Okay. So you say the oldest known vulnerability is still a big problem, and that's default passwords. Why haven't we fixed this yet?
Well, so this is,
go ahead.
I would do some vulnerability scans for some of my clients, and one of the things I like to do is see how long ago did we know about this vulnerability? Like, is this just like last week and we just haven't patched, or what's up with that? And I've seen admin come up on the vulnerability report, right? This username admin, password admin.
Right.
And when I look at when that first started coming around, that was in like 1969, 1970, that we knew systems are using admin. And still devices today are shipping with admin. So this is a 40-year vulnerability.
And
At what point is it going to ever be gone?
And
Right.
back then when they first saw it, like those were the first usernames and passwords that were able to be implemented, and they were still
Like, how long does it take for us to just completely eradicate? Like, if you think about healthcare, like we come up with we don't have smallpox anymore because we've found a cure for it. When are we ever going to find a cure for this 40-year-old vulnerability of default passwords?
so we could probably make the correlation that people that don't change the default username and passwords are kind of like anti-vaxxers.
No.
Oh wow, boy, we're just killing it, ain't we, tonight? Oh my God. So, all right. So here's the question: Why is it that they put those in the first place? Is it a testing thing and they just forget to remove them? Is it somebody might need to bypass a system and be able to get back in? I mean, there are systems out there. Communication systems, routers, switches, IoT is the biggest with I think the biggest issue now with default passwords. How do you fix it? I mean, is it just the fact that they're not going in and doing due diligence to remove those, or is there a better way of not setting default passwords? I'm thinking default passwords is stuff that's been left in after the fact. Like testing.
Default passwords themselves are fine because you need something easily documentable that they can, give the user the how-to on how to start setting it up. But maybe like you can't use this device until the password's reset.
I've seen
I think
that.
there's a way to do this. I mean, just think about it. There has to be a way to have a device that doesn't have a default password.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's my first need, Jack.
Yeah, you hard connect to it and you set the password, right?
Bingo.
Because you have physical access, you set it. There is no default password, or it's gigantically randomized, right?
Right.
Just for starters.
Right.
I mean, there's a solution to this. We just don't want to find a solution to it. I mean, you have thousands of or millions of security cameras on the internet with default passwords, right? You have the Mirai botnet, which took advantage of 100,000 IoT devices with default passwords. Mm-hmm. That was one of the attack vectors.
Yeah,
and it's very widespread, very common. Why hasn't the world of IT come up with a solution and try to enforce, like, hey, we're not gonna endorse your product. You're gonna get low ratings on Amazon or whatever if you have default passwords, if you haven't solved this problem.
Well, I think that's what happens with every new technology. So, when firewalls and everything came out, they were fairly rudimentary and they used default passwords, enterprise grade stuff. I mean, even Cisco stuff still now has a default password in many things. We get one industry educated up, in this case, network integrate, enterprise grade kit. Then all of a sudden another system or another industry comes in, which would be, IoT. And now, they're playing fast and loose with everything because they want to be the first to market. They want to be easy for the user to use because look, hey, we're awesome. All you have to do is, say, hey, Alexa, I want, 1,000, jars of Vaseline, ship it, that kind of thing. Sorry if you have an Alexa, I apologize.
We should do that more often.
Hey, Google. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, Siri.
Yeah. So, I mean, it seems like every time we have a new industry come in and what IoT and then car hacking, cars are incredibly insecure because it's like people don't realize, oh, we just put a gigantic computer or we just put a number of computers in these cars. And we don't have to worry about securing them in the first place because nobody's going to do that because it's really cool and awesome. It takes a little while. It takes, hacker types to go in, like Mr. Valasek and Mr. Miller to go in and show them how wrong they are. And it's slow and painful sometimes to get to that point. So, I mean, does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's like there's a botnet. Another botnet was called the Karna botnet, which also took advantage of this. Not only was it looking for default passwords, but just computers online that are on the internet, facing on the internet, that were open on port 23, and just testing that for this. So, I mean, that was not too long ago, too. 2012. This was still happening. So. And that created a 400,000 node botnet on just that stuff. So this is still happening. But yeah, it's ridiculous that this is still a problem that I have to face, that I have to deal with.
Right. Okay. So here's a question: which one is actually worse? This is the oldest known vulnerability. What you're saying is default passwords. Which one is worse, default passwords, or the fact that we still have passwords, or that the password complexities are being enforced, and as we've seen, 8 characters upper lower number special just doesn't cut it anymore. Which one is of those three is the biggest issue?
It's a good question. I think the default password still. I mean, if we're battling it for 40 years, then gosh. It's so easy to look up, as you just look up default password for this and boom, you're in. I've had so many pen testers in my network find the default password to tools that I didn't even realize that was the default password to it. And it's just ridiculous. But if they have a weak password that they're trying to get into, well, at least they have to take some experience and knowledge, and they've got to have some sort of, know how to use John the Ripper or something to get past it. Well, a default password anybody can grab.
Right. Go ahead, Mr. Betcher.
Well, you do have vuln scanners for that as long as you're scanning. Now, they're not going to pick up everything because if you remember back at the place, there was some obscure tool that we used that we scanned it, and that tool didn't pick up the fact that the developer on the project or the sysadmin who installed the software didn't change the default password.
Yeah. I mean, vuln scanners will only look for what it what the various vuln scanners are supposed to look for, and it's a hot mess. I mean, unless you're actually doing code reviews or something, that maybe you find those hard coded creds inside of a library somewhere, or binary, which you have to decompile or disassemble yourself, which can be a pain in the ass. So I can
see it's hard for those vendors to take every single possible device and enter the default password into its phone scanning, package or whatnot. That's a chore.
Yeah.
How can anyone keep up with that?
It seems like a poor process, if they have default creds for testing purposes, which I can completely understand why they would need to do that for ease of use, inside the network. But, there should be a process, whether you're using DevOps or whatever, once testing is done, before it ships, we need to go through and scrub out all the naughty bits, including default creds or, the fact that passwords can be set blank or something like that. It just smacks of a lack of good process in the the development arena there. So. Ms. Berlin, do you have any other closing thoughts on this?
Mm-mm.
Cool.
Yeah, all you have to do is say, if password equals such and such, force change.
Right.
That's it.
Right. Yeah, and I've seen that on like DDWRT, where it's like, oh, you can't use this until you set a root password, or you can log into the web server and then it's like, oh, you need to put a password in. Nothing will work until then. That's fairly easy to implement. Should be fairly easy to solve in that case. So.
Yep. And if they change it to admin, then it's their fault.
Right.
It's their problem.
Yep. And that was part one of our interview with Jack from DarkNet Diaries. If you want to listen to DarkNet Diaries or any of the episodes that he and we discussed on this episode, you can go to darknetdiaries.com. That's darknetdiaries.com. You can also find Jack on Twitter. He's at Tunnels Up, TUNNELSUP. And if you want to follow Ms. Berlin, she is at InfoSister, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher, you can find him at Betcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. The official show Twitter is at Breaksec, BRAKESEC. And we have a very active Slack. If you're interested in joining that, you can DM Breaksec or you can email bds.podcast@gmail.com. We thank our Patreon supporters for helping us out with our donations, especially Tim, who just recently gave us $10 for, because he loves the show. So I appreciate that. It goes to audio upgrades, Zoom that we use to record this show, and also to, do hosting costs for the podcast. So it was very much well received. Thank you. We're on Apple Podcast. If you go to Apple Podcast and you like the show, please leave some feedback because that allows people to discover the show if they're new to listening. We're also on the Google Play Store, Stitcher, Spotify, and TuneIn Radio app. So amongst others. So if you're interested in listening again, there's almost no place that you can't find us. So that was it for part one of this episode and for Breaking Down Security this week. So please have a great week. Be nice to one another, and we will talk to you again soon.